instead of saying, I don't know, let me go ask, perhaps they can talk it out with these folks, ask more questions, get to a point, because they know when they come to me, that's what I'm going to ask them. So once they start asking themselves that question, they've moved up a tier.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study Series. On today's episode, I have with me Ian Hill, who is the Director of Business Development at Blackthorn.io, a leading provider of Salesforce native applications for event management, payments, and messaging. With over a decade of experience in the business development and customer acquisition space, Ian focuses on leveraging AI-driven solutions to streamline sales processes and enhance customer engagement. At Blackthorn, he plays a key role in expanding the company's market reach and helping clients optimize their use of Salesforce technologies, which is why we're excited to have him on the show. Ian, welcome to the program.
Much appreciated, Devin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. I'm excited to get into some of the work you're doing here at Blackthorn, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, Ian, let's start with a quick background on who you are, where you came from, and how you landed your role as Director of Business Development at Blackthorn.
Sure, be happy to. I'm a musician. I'm a chef. I spent 15 years in restaurants, and it was time to retire and get into something else. And I fell into tech sales in Seattle. And my first job was a BDR, and I didn't know anything. And I went in there and I said, I got hustle and grit. Learned that from being a restaurant guy. And from day one, it just all clicked. And so I grew into an AE and eventually discovered that my brain lives in strategy and management and leadership and taking a team to the promised land, if you will. And I landed at Blackthorn just a couple months ago. They were looking to expand and grow their BDR team, and I said that's right up my alley. So that's how I got here. It's been a pretty cool grind. We've been around for about 10 years, but we've made a few changes. We're growing. We're still pretty agile. And we're doing a lot of great things, being a Salesforce native app, a Salesforce partner of the year. So doing a lot of cool stuff, and we're still growing.
There's two things that I picked up on there that I imagine you probably draw a lot of your expertise from. One being a musician, being artistic, being creative, I think
Uh,
gives you the flexibility and freedom to think outside the box, as some people may or may not. But then combine that with your experience in the restaurant space, being that customer service is kind of the forefront of some of your efforts there, and um, being very attuned to people's needs, being able to listen, being able to problem solve on the fly in high pressure situations. These are just probably some of the skills I think you developed along the way. What else do you think has kind of lended to your ability to be an effective leader of teams?
I think that's a great question. You did really hit on those 2 points, especially with music. There's no wrong notes, there's just jazz, right?
Right.
And so part of saying that is being able to take a situation and understand it, but also as a good salesperson, we don't want to have wrong notes. We want
Mhm.
jazz, right? We need to be able to lead folks down that path of understanding. We're the experts, whether we like it or not, right? People are looking at us to be experts. So that being said, I think having a deep understanding of how people work. So one of the things I think gets left behind quite a bit in sales, especially, is the psychology of why people buy. We can sit here and say, well, we have the best product. We do the best at this. You're going to get the best ROI. If that's how people bought, we wouldn't need salespeople. You just list that on your website and somebody would go to it and say, okay, I'm going to buy now, right? We need, in general, to get salespeople to understand better the psychology of buying, right? Because if we can understand the people on the other side of the table better, we can better tailor our pitch, our sales process to what they are looking for. So I spend quite a bit of time, like a lot of these books behind me are sales psychology books, poker books. Poker books are an outstanding way of reading other people. And so I spend a lot of my time trying to get in the brain of the people we're selling to, because the better I understand you, the better I can sell to you.
Right. Communication is such a powerful tool to have, and I'm surprised more people aren't practicing it because I think it's a skill. It's not something that we're innately born with. It's not something that we're just inherently good at. It's something that you have to work on developing. I think a big part of that is learning how to listen to people first, learning how to ask questions to get the information that'll help you help them, and then being able to prescribe a solution from the sales kind of frame of like, hey, look, it sounds like this is the problem. Here's here's the solution that's going to fix that problem. How can I help you manage that change now and get you into that place where you want to do something? And this kind of speaks to the whole overarching customer experience path of first discovering that there's a problem, then discovering that there are businesses or people out there that solve those problems, and then vetting them to make a decision. So for you in the work that you're doing, carving out that experience path for people that are looking for something like what Blackthorn offers, what does that look like for you? What does that pathway look like?
One of the things that I'm going to challenge you with what you just said, which I don't think is wrong, but I think is a different way we can frame this, is there's not always a problem,
Mm, good point.
right? We talk to a lot of people who are satisfied with where they are at.
Right.
And that's where it comes into place. They don't perceive themselves to have a problem,
Mm,
right? And so at that point, we need to identify that there's growth potential for them, right? And so again, it goes into psychology, the language, the things that we say, the words we use, right? If we try and harp on a problem, there's people who are going to hang up with us and go, we don't have one.
mm,
Sorry. Whereas we can challenge them to say, you're here and you're hitting numbers. What if for less effort, less money, you can get even more? So now instead of solving a problem, we've created a greater solution, greater pathway to achieving KPIs, exceeding KPIs, and so on. Whereas, some folks do have a problem and we fix it for them. Those are usually the easiest. It's a little bit tougher when you are creating a better way because people are set in their ways, and
mm,
it's a little tougher to get them to get off that a little bit. But I can tell you, I feel like that's more rewarding because when you have a problem, you just go get a solution. When you're hungry, you eat, right?
right.
That's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But that next tier up is opening the floodgates to do an even better job. And that's why I don't lean on problems. I lean on solutions.
Got it. Well, as you were speaking, you reminded me of something a mentor told me very early in my career. This concept of torching the island. So imagine you are by yourself, you're on an island. It's a very small island. The resources are limited, but you're not going to die. So you don't necessarily have to do anything. It's a lot of
Right,
work. It's grueling every day, all day. You have to do the same repetitive tasks, but you're not going to die.
right,
If you look off yonder on the skyline, you'll see that with a brisk swim, you could reach the mainland where there is abundance. There are all kinds of resources. You don't have to work nearly as hard to get those resources. They are there for you, free for the taking. All you have to do is swim across the water to get to the other side. Most people don't want to do that because they're comfortable where they are. So this is the Tony
right.
Robbins thing. When the pain of change becomes less than the pain of staying the same, that's when you can make that decision to move forward. And so this is an idea of, well, you're going to have to, get the gas can out and start burning the island down so that there's no reason for you to stay there. And it's not as comfortable as you want it to be. So I think that that maybe is what you're alluding to is that, hey, listen, this is great. You're on an island. It looks good, but you could be over here and you could have all of this if that was something that you're interested in. Is that kind of what you're aiming at?
So exactly, is you have to enable these folks to understand that the swim,
Mm,
while it's a big undertaking, is at the end of the day going to lead you to a better place.
right.
And sometimes, yeah, torching the island is the easiest way, right? You need a new car, light the other one on fire. You're going to definitely need a new car,
Yeah.
right? I Again, that's a little extreme, but point being is that's our job, is to teach these folks how important it is to swim to the mainland,
Right. And okay,
right?
so for the work that you're doing now, I picked up that you mentioned you're kind of new to the whole Blackthorn
Mhm.
ecosystem. At first glance, what's going right? What are some areas that you want to focus on improving? And what are some of the goals that you're aiming at?
Sure. Where when I came in, I took over a BDR team of excellent reps
Hmm.
who I'll be blunt. Not a lot of process. It was a lot of these folks were on their own island, right? And
Mm.
they needed somebody to teach them how to swim, right? They could tread water, but they weren't swimming to the mainland, to
Right.
continue with the metaphor. And so where I came in was, I mean, the biggest thing that I can do as a manager is understand where you're at, me, and how do we fill that gap? It's gap
Right.
selling, right? It's the same thing.
Hmm.
And so the team's doing well, but I'm at that point now where we're doing well, but we could be doing better. We could be
Mm.
doing a lot better, right? But how do we get there? And so me as a salesperson, I have to enable them to get to that place. So the things that are going well is we have some bright people who are doing some really cool things. They're agile. Things change. We operate like a small startup where things are changing all the time. That's a little chaotic. And so they get a ton of props from me for really staying with it and pivoting on a dime because you gotta. So, that's all great. Areas of improvement, I mean, it's the same as anywhere else. Getting better at the product, getting better at growing beyond that base level of solution selling,
Mm.
right? Like there's solution selling's good. But when you're just selling a solution, again, if there's no problem, your solution's out the window. And so I spend a lot of my time getting these folks up to that critical thinking level of every person is different, right? How do you got to get off thinking like this is the only way to do things. And so that's where I think they can improve more than anything. And BDRs it's an entry level role just about anywhere you go. And that's why I love it is these are our future sales leaders. And it's critical for me to pass on that information that was taught to me and give it back to them so that they can be our future sales leaders, future $1 million AEs, and so on.
Right.
So again, I don't think we have a problem. I think we have a ton of room to grow and improve and make these guys some killers and gals, excuse me.
Right. Yeah, and that's I think as a good leader, part of that is somebody said this to me in a podcast. Actually, I think it was. Um, when you come in as a leader into a team or as a CEO, your job is to find the smartest people you know that are way smarter than you and get them to solve problems that you could never imagine solving. And then when they run into their problems, they're going to bring them back to you. And now you are charged with this task of solving problems that the smartest people in your organization can't solve.
Right.
And I thought that was such a conundrum, such a strange balancing act to be the guy who has to find the people who are smarter than you to fix that, and then for them to have the problem come back to you now for you to be charged with fixing that. So I get a lot, I'm getting that from you is that like that's a big part of what you're doing is that, okay, everybody's kind of doing some stuff and it seems to be working, but we want to maybe be a little bit more intentional about this, a little more systematic so that we can focus on areas to optimize and improve where we can so that all of that rising tide lifts all ships kind of mentality.
Right. Yeah, you're spot on. Um, I think the biggest thing we can teach people is to think for themselves
Mm.
instead of telling them what to do. They need to be able to operate where they see a scenario and they go. I tell my team this all the time: lead with solutions. It was one of the things I learned at my very first BDR job. Lead with solutions. Don't
Right.
like come to me with a problem, but the first thing I'm gonna ask you is what do you think you should do about it?
Mm.
You know, that's enabling critical thinking in the moment. And the more that I can get them into that habit, the more on these calls when they get a odd question, instead of saying I don't know, let me go ask, perhaps they can talk it out with these folks, ask more questions, get to a point because they know when they come to me, that's what I'm going to ask them. So once they start asking themselves that question, they've moved up a tier, right?
Right.
And so that's kind of what I'm getting at here is, yeah, I could write a book about this and say, here's how you be a good BDR. But everybody's different. It's not going to work on everybody, right? I need to teach the individual how to critically think in any situation and be able to navigate it. So if they're ever on a desert island, they're not going to be able to call anybody, how do I pick a coconut? You got to figure it out.
Right. And that figure it out part is what I think what your point is, that that's a skill that people can develop. And I
Yep.
mean, to add to that, what I might say is there are two different styles of kind of like managing or leading a team. And one is to give them very specific tasks. When they complete those tasks, they come back to you for more tasks. And this is a very mindless way of doing business or operating inside of a team because everybody still relies on that one source of task management
Right.
versus goal oriented management style where it's like, hey, listen, we're all in the same boat, we're all aiming in the same direction. How do you see us getting there? And then allowing people to create those solutions for themselves and for the team and to collaborate and reach that to that end of, yeah, we finally arrived at a destination where we have an optimized sales system, really good marketing team, everybody's operating cohesively.
Yep. And celebrate failure. I
Mm,
think there's such a fear of failing. Celebrate failure because we only half of it is enabling these folks to figure it out, try things, take a chance. That's all good stuff. But there's always a fear of repercussions from failure.
hmm
And so we need to celebrate failure. We need to look at things like I built a sequence for this trend that I saw and it ended up backfiring and it was terrible. And I'm going to go, that's fantastic because that's great data that we have that we can say never ever do this again. Right. And so what comes with leading with solutions and taking chances is celebrating the failures because that's just as good a data, if not better.
Okay, so to that end, what do we measure? How do we know what we're doing is working, and how do we know what we're doing is not working? How long do we let things go before we decide that they are or they're not? And I get that this is kind of subtle and nuanced, and there's a lot of different ways that everybody else does it. But for you, Ian, what do you specifically focus on to help optimize your team?
Sure. So the way I look at it is kind of the 80-20 rule,
Hmm.
right? Where I want like 80% of their time is doing what we know works,
Right.
at least, right? There's enough things out there that we know that these are just the things that work all the time, right? We
Mm.
know that BDRs don't book themselves meetings or BDRs book meetings by making phone calls. You don't make phone calls, you don't make meetings, right? So we can implement that base level of activity. Here's the things that you do. But beyond that is the taking the chances. So we always want to keep them focused on this road of here's my day to day. I know what to do. But we want them when they have those one offs that's where we really need to enable the critical thinking. Because if people are asking the standard questions, if they have a potential customer that's asking them run of the mill questions that they can answer, they're not growing. Where they're going to
Mm.
grow is those off the beaten path questions where they're going to have to sit and navigate with these folks. And that's where they're really going to grow is in that periphery of one-offs.
Ah, I see, I see. So, as we kind of come to a close here, I wonder if we can look a little bit forward on the horizon. What's in store for Blackthorn? What are you aiming at? What are some of the big goals that you hope to achieve here in the next year?
Well, our fiscal year ends in a couple months, and so the big goal for us right now is tools in place, process in place. Because as I mentioned, when I came on board, there wasn't really a ton of that. And
Mm,
so right now, and I think this should go for anybody who's watching this, is get your training in place, get your systems in place, get the tools where they need to be, enable the team to understand how to use them, and you're going to be in a really good spot. I think we're in a pretty good spot. I think by the end of the year, we're going to be at that really good where all of our ducks are in a row, and then we can go out and rule the world, right? So the short term, that's what we're looking at. I mean, I think the obvious thing is we have revenue goals that we want to hit.
hmm
Um, and the only way, I'll quote one of my books. One of my favorite books is Breaking the Management Code. And we don't manage dashboards. We don't manage reports. All that is a reflection of what's already happened. We have to manage the daily activities, the daily grind, that stuff, because that's going to be the output. We can't we can't manage the business aspect or the business impact, right? It's already done. So I try and stay focused on the day to day, the week to week, the process stuff, because if we keep our focus there, then good things will come out of it. It's like we tell the BDR. So BDR's job is to book a meeting for an account executive, generally. If they focus on the conversation, active listening, providing solutions, the meeting will book itself. But if you're always focused on the meeting, you're going to miss something and you're probably not going to get the meeting anyway. And it's that frame of mind that is going to make us successful.
I love that. To your point, if you are actively looking at the wrong things to measure, you're never going to get anywhere that you need to be because your attention's in the wrong direction.
Right.
Instead of looking back at all the stuff that happened, we got to be looking forward at what we're optimizing for. So I really love that. Um, if we were to imagine another business development person out there who's kind of up to it, trying to create their own things, um, and they're looking for some solutions, what sort of advice might you offer them to kind of help keep them pushing along and find their way?
The biggest advice that I can give anybody, and this includes my team, anybody I've managed, anybody new looking to break into sales, is don't fall in line,
Mm.
right? And what I mean by that is, especially you go on LinkedIn, everybody's an expert on LinkedIn. Everybody has a level of contribution. Hey, I did this thing. Look, this is how you be successful. And it doesn't work that way with everybody. Um, think for yourself. Think outside the box. Go another way. Because by the time somebody on LinkedIn provides an amount of information as an expert, they've already tried this with a million people,
Mm.
right? This is already just kind of dead information. If you see a trend that all the salespeople are using the same subject line to get the email opened, try something different, because as a guy that gets 20 or 30 of those emails every day and they all have the same subject, I know what they are. So if LinkedIn is saying always leave voicemails, maybe you don't. Or if nobody's leaving voicemails, maybe you should. Stand out from the crowd. That's what's going to set you apart, why people are going to open your emails or take your calls. But if you would look like every other salesperson, because people inherently don't want to talk to us, they're not going to want to talk to you, and it doesn't matter what you're selling. So be creative, think outside the box, try something new. Don't be the same salesperson that everybody else is, because I can tell you the people that make it are the ones that did all that stuff, and the people that are just run of the mill making decent money but not going anywhere are the ones that are doing what everybody else is doing.
Man, I love that. I have this thing that I tell people when I'm working with them in the studio. I always say, hey, listen, music has rules for a reason. You got to figure out what those rules are. And that part sucks. But as soon as you know what all the rules are, you can break them on purpose. And
Right.
sometimes when you do that, it sounds incredible.
And you get jazz.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
you're exactly right.
yeah, Ian, this has been great, man. You've been
Mhm.
very generous with your time and your wisdom, and I'm grateful for that. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain further or perhaps work with you, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. You search Blackthorn, Ian Hill. You can email me, ian@blackthorn.io. If you're creative enough, I'm sure you can find my phone number somewhere on the internet. My phone's always on. Uh, but again, it rings off the hook all day. Be creative. I do answer the phone. I do answer emails for those ones that stick out. And I'm always, I'll leave you with this. Uh, I was so greatly given the information that I have and trained the way that I am, that I'm always happy to take a phone call, offer guidance, offer feedback on anything. Uh, but anybody is, if you can get a hold of me. If you can find me, I'm happy to.
Wonderful. We'll make sure to link to at least your LinkedIn in the show notes so that anybody that's
There you go.
looking can find you a little easier. On that note, if anybody wanted to reach out to me and my team for any of your marketing or your AI needs, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us for this incredible conversation, and I will see you in the next.